And fella with me, Adam Scher, Ship My Money DFS. What's good, brother?
How's it going, man? Nice 8 game slate. Got some decent pitching for what feels like the first time in a while.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. So the same thing this morning that for an eight gamer, given the type of pitching we've seen lately, it's really not that bad. It's actually one of the deepest we've seen. And I think you're seeing so much concentrated pitching where like a lot of the great pitchers will be on one slate and then the next slate it's just utter trash. Hopefully it starts to mix itself up a bit again.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's been pretty ugly lately.
So we've got eight games. And a good amount of top tier pitching. I guess the biggest question here though is like, are any of these guys at the top really intriguing you? Outside, well, like outside of, we can talk about Nola. I know you're a big Matt Boyd guy in general though. He's pretty expensive, at least on DraftKings. He's very expensive. And then Clevenger against Cleveland. We can get into all of them individually once we get to those games. But just to kick it off, how often do you see yourself kind of at the top of this pitcher pool tonight?
Well, I think that the pricing on Chris Sale on DraftKings and FanDuel in particular makes it really interesting, but also kind of messes things up just because he is so cheap. He really should never be like the fourth most expensive pitcher on a slate. So I think that, and right now we have him projected to be the highest owned pitcher on DraftKings and 24% on FanDuel, but that's not really crazy ownership. So if that stays how it is, I expect that I'll just get to a lot more Sale than anyone. But yeah, like it's site dependent too, because Matt Boyd's price is very, very friendly on Yahoo, but he's the most expensive pitcher on DraftKings. Clevenger is pretty expensive across the board in a tough spot. I guess the one thing that stands out among all the top pitchers is that none of them are in great spots. Like Boyd's probably in the best spot against Kansas City.
Yeah, and the only reason I didn't mention Sale, I should have lumped him in there, was just because I think at his price, it's kind of just obvious, even though it's a tough matchup. But it's pretty obvious. I think the other guys, ownership and a lot more goes into it. So we'll get to all of those games throughout the day or throughout the show. We'll start with Toronto and New York. Really on a deep or on a slate with less pitching, I could probably make a good argument for Domingo Germán today against Toronto. But how are you going to get there when you've got the Grays down beneath him, the Sales, the Nolas up above him? It's kind of no man's land for Germán against Toronto.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I started to write him up in today's deep dive article, and then it kind of just felt like I would be writing him up just to do it, because I don't think that I'll get to a lot of him simply because of the pitchers that are around him. I think it's a perfectly fine matchup against Toronto. I think he's a good pitcher. He has the fifth highest strikeout percentage on the slate at 26.1%. He's got the fourth best walk percentage at 5.7%, has a 3.91 Sierra, which is good. Really good stuff. The problem is just that, you have Clevenger, Sale, Boyd, Nola all on the slate and not even that much more expensive. So it just gets really difficult for me to get there to Germán, outside of the fact that he is projected for 6% ownership on DraftKings. So, that is pretty appealing. But other than that, I think it's just pretty tough to get there.
How about the Yankee bats here against Pannone? Yesterday, they won tournaments for anyone who played them, or anyone who won tournaments was playing the Yankees. Let me rephrase that. What are your thoughts on them today here at the Rogers Center?
Yeah, pretty decent spot again against Thomas Pannone. He's not the worst pitcher, but he's kind of just a run-of-the-mill generic lefty going up against, a really cheap Aaron Judge, but, also DJ LeMahieu, Urshela has some power. The lineup's really bad, but it somehow, continues to hit well. Still has an implied run total over 6 and is relatively affordable. So, going right back to the Yankees today, I'm sure.
All right. Well, I don't see really any reason not to, and I'm assuming Thomas Pannone, despite being cheap, is not on your pitchers list today.
No, don't really expect to be taking him.
Who are your favorite Yankee bats? Because again, and I'll reiterate this. We've talked about it a lot this week, but Stanton, Hicks, Gleyber Torres, Luke Voit, Encarnacion, Gary Sanchez. These are all the significant injuries this team has faced recently. As far as the lineup goes today, all of them are out. So you've got LeMahieu, Judge, Urshela, Gregorius, Cameron Maybin, Mike Tauchman, who is not cheap, Austin Romine, Mike Ford, Breivik, Valera. Like it's not the best lineup, but it kind of doesn't matter, I guess. The question is, Are some of these guys that shouldn't be as expensive as they are worth it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the one thing. Aaron Judge obviously stands out. I
Yeah.
expect him to probably be the most popular hitter on DraftKings. He'll probably be up there on FanDuel as well. If you're playing,
Right now he is projected to be the or the highest owned hitter on DraftKings by by almost 10%.
right? And yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. If you're playing cash on DraftKings, you basically just have to have him. Like if you play someone that doesn't have Judge and cash on DraftKings, they made a mistake, and you should probably play them more often. But the lineup, just talent wise, is pretty bad. You don't even have Torres in the lineup, so it's really LeMahieu and Judge as far as guys that have a track record of being above average hitters. Everyone else, you're kind of just rostering them because they're on the Yankees, and the Yankees have a 6.2 implied run total.
Okay. I mean, I agree with you, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. It's amazing. It's crazy to think what the run total would be with actual good hitters in the lineup.
Right.
Boston and the LA Angels, Dylan Peters, Chris Sale. We kind of already alluded to this, teased it a bit. Chris Sale, anytime Chris Sale's at a price like this, he's going to be popular. The matchup is really, irrespective of matchup, you're going to see a lot of ownership go to Chris Sale. 30% right now on DraftKings. That's the highest among all pitchers, tied with John Gray. 24% on FanDuel, 39% on Yahoo. That's the highest of any player as well. So, you go across the board. Chris Sale, with the price being deflated a little bit, he's going to be a popular one today. It is against a tough Angels team, but an Angels team that has struck out a little bit more recently, has not been particularly excellent at the plate. But you have Ohtani back in the lineup. You have Mike Trout, Upton, Pujols, Calhoun. What are your thoughts here on this lineup and Chris Sale overall?
Yeah, I think we've talked about it a lot recently, but the Angels are still a good team. It's still a good lineup, but it's not quite as brutal a matchup as it has been for a lot of the season.
Right.
Andrelton Simmons is on the injured list, so essentially you're replacing him with, in this case, Wilfredo Tovar, who's a low strikeout guy, but also just a really bad hitter. Projects for an ISO below 100, according to Steamer, has a WRC plus well below 100. So that's a downgrade for the lineup. And then for most of the year, they've had Jonathan Lucroy, a catcher, who is someone with a 11 to 12% strikeout percentage. Tonight you have Max Stassi, who in 135 plate appearances against lefties since the start of 2017 has struck out just shy of 30% of the time. So that's obviously an upgrade for Sale. In this lineup in general, looking at their numbers against left-handed pitching over the last few years, the only players in the lineup with a WRC plus above 100 are Mike Trout, obviously, and Justin Upton. Tovar is up there as well, but that's 26 plate appearances, so not counting him. But obviously Sale has the platoon advantage against Ohtani, who's much worse against left-handed pitching. Calhoun, not great against left-handed pitching. Pujols, just not great at this point in his career. So I still think it's a pretty decent spot for Sale.
Yeah, and it's Chris Sale, and he's too cheap. So,
Yep.
Like it doesn't. Even if it was one of their better lineups, I think we'd still be having a similar conversation. But you make some good points there that this lineup does have more strikeouts and less talent than a lot of Angels lineups we've seen this season, which really only benefits Chris Sale. Now, there are two teams on the slate, right, with a run total of 6 or higher. Actually, the third highest run total is 5-1, so it falls off more than a full run from the second highest projected team to the third. But the Yankees are the second highest at 6.2 runs, and we talked about them already. Then you have Boston at 6.9. We're talking about them right now. Boston Red Sox, 6.9 run implied total against Dylan Peters at Fenway Park. I imagine that you're not opposed to some Red Sox bats here. I'll say this much, by the way. On the earlier ownership projections, when we ran them for this morning's show, Mookie and JD and Bogarts were all like way higher owned than I thought. Because of their price tags, I thought they'd be lower, basically, from a stack perspective. But that is not the case, because JD and Mookie are, second and third in ownership among hitters on DraftKings. Bogarts is at 16%. Like they will have ownership, and obviously they have the highest total, so it makes sense. But do you like them as much as you would have if they were, as low owned as we've seen them in recent days?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would prefer that they be low owned, but with this implied run total, I obviously don't think that'll be the case. But I think that you can still make some pretty contrarian Boston lineups because you'll see a lot of ownership going to, Betts and JD, like you said. You'll see some to Sam Travis and Bogarts. But beyond that, you're probably going to get relatively low ownership on the guys toward the bottom of the order, potentially on an expensive Rafael Devers and a lefty-lefty matchup. Jackie Bradley's really cheap on FanDuel at 2,600. Sandy Leon's a really cheap catcher option. So from a full stack standpoint, I think you probably still get some, you can make some pretty interesting Boston lineups. And I just think that, we have really similar ownership right now between Boston and New York stacks in the aggregate. And I just prefer Boston because, you look at the amount of talent in the Boston lineup compared to the New York lineup. And it's just hard for me to think that the Yankees keep up with the Red Sox a high percentage of the time.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Boston right now has the highest projected ownership across the board, FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo, but also one of the highest top stack probabilities, second behind only the Yankees. So there's that. And I don't disagree with you. It's just one of those really, really favorable spots. Let me ask you, if you are going with Boston stacks, I don't know if you run crunches yet, but you're a pretty intuitive fella. You can figure this out on the fly. If you're going Boston stacks, say 4 or 5 man Boston stack, do you see yourself getting down to like a Jorge Lopez or a Alicia Hernandez, maybe a John Gray Bumgarner? Because my guess is it's going to be pretty difficult to go like Gray and Chris Sale or Gray and Nola. Yeah,
it'll be pretty tough. Like if you looking on DraftKings, if you go with Sale Gray, you get $39.75 per position. That probably, if you're stacking the Red Sox, forces you on to like Sandy Leon as part of that stack. And then you're like a Sam Travis probably too. So I think that it would kind of constrict your ability to get creative within your Boston stacks. I don't love going down to the cheap pitching on this slate. So I could see going to maybe like a Gray plus Bumgarner, like you said, or Gray plus Keuchel. But yeah, I think that like you can do it with Sale and Gray. I think it's just that you're going to have very similar Boston stacks to everyone else that does that.
Yeah, because if you go with the 1 through 4 hitters, let's just say the 1 through 4 hitters and Sale and Gray, you have 4 spots remaining and you have $2,600 per player.
Right. Yeah. So you can't like you can't get all of those guys. You would have to get, JD, Mookie, Leon, Travis, and then, Jackie Bradley or whatever.
Right. You're definitely going towards the bottom of the order, maybe trying to get 2 of the top bats in, but you're not going to get all of them with those guys. Now it's doable. You just have to pay down at pitcher, at least one of them, and then life becomes a little bit easier. Anything else on this game?
No, I don't think so.
Let's talk about the Cubs and Cincinnati Reds then. Cole Hamels and Alex Wood. Hamels another guy where I think I'd be a lot more interested in him. A lot more interested in him had this slate, shaken out a little bit differently given who's on it. What are your thoughts on Hamels here against the Reds?
Yeah, I mean, tough park for pitching. Not a great strikeout matchup either. The Reds lineup it's not a lot of familiar names, but some low strikeout guys in Iglesias, Peraza, Suarez, obviously a really good hitter. Aquino has power. Senzel is a good hitter. Votto is a good enough hitter. Just not a great spot for strikeouts here. A little bit more expensive price tag on Hamels than I would like, considering the alternatives around them. So I think it's pretty tough for me to get there. I think you can look to the Reds for some value too. Especially Aquino hitting 4th, Iglesias hitting 5th as a cheap shortstop option. Phillip Ervin's reasonably priced as well, and even Senzel leading off. So I think the Reds are a team that, even though I have a ton of respect for Cole Hamels as a pitcher, I think that you get some power upside in this park.
Yeah, no question. And Cole Hamels isn't completely immune to giving up home runs, but I will say this year he's done a very good job of limiting power, even at home inside of Globe Life. Before he was actually, was he on the Cubs the whole season this year?
Yeah,
he was.
Yep.
Oh man. All right.
Yeah, they got him last year.
Nevertheless, 9 home runs across 18 starts and 104 innings is pretty good. Like that's
yeah, no question.
Really good no matter where you're pitching at.
Yeah, I mean 135 expected ISO with a 25.5% strikeout percentage against righties this year.
I mean, it's really good. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Alex Wood? He's made 2 starts. There was a time where I really liked this guy and thought, okay, we're on to something good here. I always call him the left-handed Lance McCullers because they have a very similar arsenal. McCullers a harder thrower, but both got a lot of ground balls. Not, I mean, ooh, excuse me, not a lot from Wood in terms of strikeouts, but a couple seasons there were. What about this season? What about Alex Wood against the Cubs? Because some of these Cubs bats are not very expensive at all.
Yeah, I think that on some slates I would have more interest in Wood because the price tag's not terrible. He is a decent pitcher, but it's still Great American. You have John Gray near him. You have Madison Bumgarner pitching in San Francisco for not that much more money. You have Keuchel against the Marlins for not that much more money. So I think it just gets really tough when you're talking about a Cubs lineup that just added Nick Castellanos to an already dangerous lineup. So you just have a lot of really difficult outs. With Castellanos, Bryant, Baez from the right side. Rizzo's a low strikeout guy, as is Jason Hayward. Jonathan Lucroy now in the lineup. So another bat that doesn't hit very well, but doesn't strike out either. So I think it's just a pretty tough spot for Alex Wood. For him to succeed, I think you're looking for one of those, 7-inning, very efficient games. And that's just not something I really like to rely on.
Do you like Castellanos, Bryant, Baez, Almora, Ian Happ, any of these guys you like particularly a lot?
Yeah, especially Castellanos and Bryant, just really favorable pricing on them. Castellanos 4,200 on DraftKings. Bryant is 4,500. Castellanos price tag is slowly rising, but slowly. And 3,400 for Castellanos on FanDuel's nice. $15 for Chris Bryant on Yahoo really stands out. So I think that while you can get to guys like Baez and Almora and Happ, also Castellanos and Bryant are the priorities.
Yeah, totally agree. Detroit and Kansas City. Matt Boyd, Jorge Lopez. We can talk about Matthew Boyd first, and then we'll get into the dirt cheap right-hander for Kansas City. With Boyd, on DraftKings, you're getting him at 11-2. He's the most expensive pitcher. On FanDuel, he's 10-4, but it doesn't make him cheap. And then on Yahoo, Boyd is down there at 43. He's cheaper than Keuchel and Herman on Yahoo. So I do think if I were to play him anywhere, I'd have most interest on Yahoo. What about you?
Yeah, the pricing on Yahoo is just really favorable. They've been low on him all season, and so that really stands out. From a talent perspective, it's not even that I think he's overpriced on DraftKings or FanDuel. Like I have been pretty clear. I think he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. But when you compare him, when you're looking, you're paying more money for him than for a Mike Clevenger or Chris Sale or Aaron Nola in San Francisco. It's still a lot of opportunity costs, so it makes it tough. So Yahoo's definitely where I would get to him the most.
What about Jorge Lopez? $4,800 on DraftKings on a night where there really is not a lot of good low end pitching. He's minimum salary on Yahoo as well.
Yeah, I could see getting there on the two pitcher sites, just hoping he throws, I talked about it before the show, but just hoping he throws like 70 pitches or something like that. The Tigers are obviously one of the best matchups in baseball. And at that price tag, if Lopez can give you, 12, 13 fantasy points, and you can pair him with one of the aces and get a bunch of good bats, then it's valuable. So yeah, I can see getting there. It's not like it's not a cheap guy that I'm really excited about from a raw point standpoint. It's just a salary play.
Are you interested in any bats from this game?
Not really. Whit Merrifield is reasonably priced, and so is Jorge Soler. We know that Matt Boyd's one real issue is the home runs. He has an elevated barrels per batted ball percentage this season, and Merrifield, Dozier, Soler are basically the only right-handed power in the lineup that I could see taking advantage.
Okay, I guess that does it for this one. You don't have a ton, it seems like. Maybe some tepid interest in Jorge Lopez, a couple bats, but not a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, any Matt Boyd I get to, I'm happy with.
Sure.
But, just most slates, I'm like pounding the table to get Matt Boyd in the lineups. I don't know that that'll be the case today.
All right. I don't think pounding a table would help get him in the lineups, though. I'm not sure what that means.
It's
I know. It means you're adamant about something. It wasn't lost on me, Adam. I just think it was misused. All right, let's talk about Dallas Keuchel. Going to be popular enough. Miami, we've discussed this a lot. Like, they're still a very bad team, but I think we both like righties against them more just based on the fact that a righty facing 8 righties is good. But he's going to have some ownership today. I see why. I don't love it, but I understand why. Good park, bad team, and he did have that big game not long ago, a couple starts back. So maybe people are still hanging on that. Let's talk about him first, and then we'll get to Hernandez.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a good matchup as far as the Marlins suck and the game's in Miami. There are some extra strikeouts in the lineup since you have Lewis Brinson and Jorge Alfaro in the same lineup. Both of them are 30+% strikeout guys. Keuchel just, not a strikeout pitcher, really never has been. That's still the case for the season, 17.8% strikeout percentage, but he does a really good job of limiting hard contact, getting ground balls, getting outs and being efficient. So I don't think he's a bad play by any stretch. I don't think he has the same upside as like John Gray, get San Diego at basically the same price. So he's not my favorite guy in this price range, but I can certainly see getting to some.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, is John Gray that much higher owned to where you're like, I think Keuchel's the better play here? The answer to that is no.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like right now we have Gray at 30% and Keuchel at 22
right.
and Bumgarner at 26. If ownership stays like that, I'm going to end up just playing the guys how I project them basically. And it would be Gray, Bumgarner, Keuchel.
What are you thinking about Alicia Hernandez?
He's definitely not in a good spot. He's in a good park, which is nice. Tough matchup against the Braves, though. He does have good strikeout stuff. And so far, he's made 7 starts, 13 overall appearances, 41 and a third innings pitched in the majors this year. 22.5% strikeout percentage is decent. He had a 34% strikeout percentage at AAA. He's certainly not been very he hasn't been very good. 5.36 xFIP in those 41 innings at the majors this year. He's still really young, but you are getting more strikeout upside from him than from someone like Jorge Lopez, at least in terms of their actual talent, not the matchup. So it's a scary spot, but I can see getting to some as an SP2.
Would you prefer Lopez or Hernandez?
Probably Lopez.
Yeah, me too. It's not pretty, but it might be worth it depending on what bats you can get in your lineups. Are you interested in hitters from either side of this against Keuchel or against Hernandez? Because with me, as much as I'm not a fan of rostering Keuchel in most starts, he's also not someone I love rostering batters against either. He still does a very good job of getting ground balls. Now he has allowed a decent amount of home runs to start his season, but I don't know if Miami is the place to look here. You tell me.
Yeah, I'm not really on the Miami bats. I do have interest in the Braves. They're looking like a pretty decent contrarian stack option. They have some expensive bats that I expect will be relatively low owned since they prohibit you from getting to the Yankees or the Red Sox. And Hernandez, certainly hasn't been lights out in the majors. The bullpen's really bad behind them. The park's not good, but outside of that, I think it's a pretty favorable spot. And looking at the top stack tool on DraftKings, we have Atlanta with a better top stack percentage than aggregate ownership. FanDuel, we have them a little bit over-owned. So looking like a better tournament stack on DraftKings than they are on FanDuel.
All right. Yeah. And not even just a better top stack chance than the aggregate ownership, but 4th best top stack probability on the slate. So
yeah. Also on Yahoo, we have their top stack percentage almost double their aggregate ownership because they are super expensive.
Yeah, that does make sense there. It's not a great part. Hernandez isn't terrible, but it's still a pretty decent spot. And, given the context of the slate, they have the 3rd highest total on the slate as well.
Right.
All right. So Cleveland, Minnesota. Mike Clevinger, Kyle Gibson. Clevinger's really not going to be popular whatsoever. He's not going to be owned. Does that give you any notion that maybe you'll go to Clevinger here, or is it just not worth it for you?
Yeah, because the strikeout stuff's just so good on him.
Yeah,
and
it's
what'd you say?
It leads the slate if you're not talking about qualified pitchers, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and he's up to 10 starts now, and he's just striking out everyone.
What's he, 37.5% or something outrageous?
He is 36.9.
36. No, I mean, come on.
Yeah. And he's actually changed his pitch mix from last season too. He's always had really, really good secondary stuff, and he has a good fastball too. But last year he was throwing his slider about 33% of the time to right-handed hitters and his curveball about 15%. This year he's throwing his slider 53% of the time to right-handed hitters with a 22.8% swinging strike percentage. He's got his curveball usage up to 22% to lefties with just shy of an 18% swinging strike percentage. So I think that's why you're seeing the increased strikeouts from a pitcher that already was good at getting strikeouts. It's obviously a tough matchup against Minnesota. Not a lot of strikeouts in the lineup, but he's just got the kind of stuff where he can strike out anyone. It's not an optimal play. It's obviously Chris Sale's the optimal pitcher at the top, but if Sale's going to be 30% owned and Clevenger's going to be 5%, then I definitely like getting to Clevenger.
I mean, yeah, especially given that, Sale could run into a rough start against the Angels as much as Clevenger could against the Twins.
Right.
Like, I mean, the guy, his fastball velocity is up 2 miles per hour from last year, which is pretty sweet. And, you talked about the pitch usage. When you're getting the amount of whiffs on the pitches that he is, like, four-seamer, he throws almost 50% of the times, gets 14% whiffs. He throws 4 pitches, and he has double-digit whiff rates on all of them. And, of course, it should be no surprise that the slider has been his best pitch in terms of missing bats. Like, he can throw pretty much anything in his arsenal and miss your bat with it. So, yeah, I like that.
And also, as a team, the Twins don't strike out a lot. But if you go individually by hitter, there are a few guys that are just really, really difficult strikeouts. But Nelson Cruz, 27%, Jason Castro, 27.5%, Miguel Sano, 35.5% strikeout percentage, Marwin Gonzalez at 23.7%. So there are some strikeouts in there individually. It's just that when you add everyone together, it comes out as a really low strikeout rate.
Right. You just got to hope that he gets the strikeouts on the guys that strike out and doesn't give up homers to the ones that don't.
Right.
And they certainly have plenty of power potential in that lineup. What's your thinking on Kyle Gibson, who's, just enigmatic and a question mark whenever he toes the rubber?
Yeah, I think it's tough to get there on this slate. Just not a really good strikeout matchup against Cleveland. His strikeout numbers drop off against lefties. He's at 25.8% against right-handed hitters this year, 21.8% against lefties. Lindor, Santana, Ramirez, Kipnis, all left-handed hitters in the top 6, and then you have Tyler Naquin down at the bottom. So just probably won't really roster Kyle Gibson.
Thoughts on hitters?
Not my favorite game. Minnesota is always a stackable team in tournaments because they have so much power, but I obviously have tons of respect for Mike Clevenger, and I have respect for Gibson too. So Cleveland is – I was looking at FanDuel pricing. I thought Cleveland was really cheap. Cleveland's, like affordable, but I don't know. I just don't love either team.
All right. Hey, if you wanted 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus subscription, all you got to do is use the promo code DEEPERDIVE, one word. Get you 50% off. Half off your first month of Awesemo Plus subscription will get you ownership, projections, top stack tool. There's the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, the lineup builder, all of our premium articles behind paywall, and so much more. That is Deeper Dive is the promo code, one word. Use that to get 50% off your first month at awesemo.com. And also check out Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the Deeper Dive. There is no MME there, okay? There is no 150 max entries per contest. There's 10 entries max per even their biggest contests. You get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points if you sign up through us. Just go to the Spotlight Hitters article on the homepage of awesemo.com. It's free, and the link is right there. You can't miss it. Spotlight Hitters article on the homepage of awesemo.com. Sign you up and get that $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points, which you can use to play and win and withdraw money. It's as good as cash on Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. All right, Adam, 2 to go here. Moving kind of quickly, but Jake and I we usually go pretty long on the strategy show, kind of whoever I'm with, particularly Josh, but I think we did the strategy show in like 55 minutes today.
Yeah, it's whenever you get like a lot of good pitching, it feels like it just goes faster because you're not getting into as many bats.
Right, exactly. A lot of good pitching and not a lot of good hitting, so you're really only spending one side on each game. And there isn't a lot of like, hey, I like the pitcher, but I also like the bats today either.
Right.
San Francisco and Philadelphia. We've got Aaron Nola and Bumgarner. 2 of the 3 lowest implied totals on this slate are from this game, both of them. 3.7 for the Giants, 3.9 for the Phillies. They're slight favorites on the road in a really good pitcher's park. Let's kick it off with Aaron Nola here. Look, the Giants are not a good baseball team. They're not, one of the highest strikeout teams either. They're not one of the lowest. They're kind of right in the middle. What do you make of Aaron Nola here at a pretty elevated price point, but also a pretty decent matchup?
It's a really good spot, obviously, for run prevention against a well below average Giants team in the best pitcher's park in baseball. My concern with Nola is just that you're paying for it.
Yep.
He's not, he's good, but in terms of talent, he's not a $10,600 pitcher on DraftKings. He's not worth $10,800 on FanDuel without factoring in the matchup. So when the matchup's factored into the pricing, it just, leaves less, like less upside. And so I like him. It's just, if we have Nola projected at 19% ownership on DraftKings right now, we have Clevenger at 5%. And you're talking about Clevenger having a strikeout percentage that is a full 10 points higher than Aaron Nola this year with a lower walk percentage. So, I don't know that it's the easiest path to winning tournaments, but still, mixing him in if you're playing 150 lineups obviously makes sense. But, from an optimal play standpoint, I think that Sale's the best option at the top. And then from a contrarian standpoint, I think it's Clevenger. So that kind of, leaves Nola as a secondary option.
I keep finding myself coming back to Clevenger too, just based on the ownership and just the ceiling of Clevenger is sky high. What about Madison Bumgarner? He's got it's pretty much a neutral matchup at this point against Philly.
Yeah, neutral matchup, but he is at home where, not surprisingly, he's just better. Yeah. He's allowed a 273 WOBA.
Well, what I meant is it's not a bad matchup. I mean, earlier this season, you and I both would have considered this a very difficult matchup and a stay away spot.
Yeah, and now I think it's pretty neutral. It's like the 13th highest strikeout percentage against lefties. Mm-hmm. It's a 105 WRC plus, and it's in San Francisco, so that kind of mitigates a lot of the power. If this game were in Philly, I really wouldn't be interested in Bumgarner, but at a reasonable price tag, and at home this year, 273 WOBA compared to 340 on the road. Strikeout percentage at home is 25.5% compared to 21.9 on the road. Walk percentage is lower, 0.89 home runs per 9 innings in Oracle compared to 1.69 home runs per 9 outside of it. So it's just, I think, a pretty decent spot for Bumgarner. Not a great matchup. I do prefer John Gray at a similar price point, but between Bumgarner and Keuchel, I think I give the edge to Bumgarner.
Do you find yourself going after any hitting in this one? Anyone stand out to you? Any cheap bats that might be worthwhile?
Brandon Belt's really cheap. He's $2,900 on FanDuel. He is $8 on Yahoo, and he's $3,500 on DraftKings. I assume he'll be leading off. And while it is a tough matchup, obviously, he's a pretty good hitter and just inexpensive on a slate where we don't have a lot of hitters that we love. So, I think looking to Belt can make some sense. And then on the other side, Real Muto at a weak catcher position is affordable in the righty-lefty matchup. Rhys Hoskins is affordable as well. Clearly not the game where I'm most excited about getting the bats. It's supposed to be 61 degrees, and the park really downplays power, but there is some favorable pricing.
All right. One more to go. San Diego, Colorado. John Gray on the road against the Padres. Very, very solid strikeout matchup here. Padres team against righties just has not been good this season. And it's not a huge surprise. They lost Fremont Reyes as well, but, just look at their active roster. A lot of strikeouts, a decent amount of power, but they're much better against lefties for obvious reasons. So John Gray is, again, obviously going to get a lot of ownership tonight at Petco Park, which is also a great park shift. Anything's a great park shift outside of Coors Field.
Yeah, and Gray manages to be decent at Coors, but it's still obviously a benefit to get out of it. The Padres active roster right now is tied with the Tigers for the second highest strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. If you go through the lineup individually, they have some good hitters that have power, but Tatis is at 31%. Hosmer is, 21% is not great, but Renfroe, 31.6% strikeout percentage against righties. Machado is tough to strike out, but Myers is at 34%. Mejia's at 24.5%. Naylor's at 25%. Urias doesn't strike out a lot. Hedges strikes out 32% if he's in the lineup over Mejia. So just a lot of guys with, 25+% strikeout percentages here. And then you also get the pitcher. And Gray is, he's good. He has a 3.87 xFIP this year, 24.1% strikeout percentage. He's affordably priced on every site. So I think whether it's as, a cheap SP1 or as an SP2, Gray will be one of my highest owned pitchers.
Okay. Across the board?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's right now looking like the field's going to be the same. But I don't have an issue with it just because, and he might not have elite strikeout stuff this year, but Gray is still a very good pitcher. I like it too. I'm with you here. What about Eric Lauer on the other side?
It's another guy that I think you can consider just as a price play at SP2. He's not super cheap, but he's kind of in a range by himself. Like you can't afford to get up to the Keuchel, Gray, Bumgarner salaries. Lauer's just kind of sitting there in an okay spot against the Colorado team that is pretty much trash outside of Coors Field. As far as right-handed power goes, you're concerned about Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado to some extent, Ian Desmond, but beyond that, there's not really right-handed power in this lineup. Lauer's kind of just a guy. He's got a 22% strikeout percentage against righties this year, 168 expected ISO, 306 expected WOBA. Certainly not a super appealing option, but he works if you need someone in that price range.
All right. Are you interested in any hitters?
Story and Arenado, just because they are both still, really, really good hitters. Tons of power from the right side. For the Padres, not really. I have respect for Gray. Tatis is really expensive. Renfroe is, I think, pretty fairly priced. On FanDuel, Josh Naylor is the absolute minimum at 2K. So that's a value bet that I think you could go to in tournaments. It's not a real high probability play, but he really shouldn't be $2,000. On Yahoo, Hunter Renfroe is $12. Naylor's $8. So those are a couple of decent values. But again, just a tough matchup against Gray. It feels like we've said that for every game, but there's like 1, 2, 4 like not very good pitchers going on the slate, and one of them's facing the Tigers.
Yeah, I know it's not easy. What are your ways to differentiate on a slate like this? We talked about Clevenger. What else do you think is doable to make make yourself different from the field?
Yeah, so I mean, one thing to keep in mind, and I know we talk about it a lot, but it's paying attention to the overall ownership of your lineups. So kind of like we had talked about when we were going through the Boston team, but with any team that you're going to stack, taking that, 1 or 2 guys from the bottom of the order, they're going to be low owned, give you a contrarian team, even if you're going to one of the popular offenses. We talked about Clevenger, I think, being a good way to differentiate. Like if you have Clevenger at pitcher, you can do pretty much whatever you want with your lineup because you're just banking on Clevenger being the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, which, will happen.
And maybe Sale won't be great.
Right, exactly. You're at that point, you're not trying to necessarily obviously trying to get the highest scoring offense, but you're not within that lineup. Your stand isn't your offense. It's that you're going to have, the best Mike Clevenger team. And if Clevenger is the best pitcher, that puts you in a really good spot. Looking at the top stack tool on the site, we mentioned Atlanta being under-owned on DraftKings and on Yahoo. Minnesota, even though Clevenger is really tough, looks like actually their ownership just came up. So Atlanta still looking like a good team to get to from a contrarian standpoint. On FanDuel, they were a little bit over-owned. On FanDuel, it looks like the Yankees maybe they're really popular, but still probably not as popular as they should be. It looks like you can go to the Angels actually have like a 5% chance of being the top stack, and they're only projected for a little shy of 3% ownership. So on FanDuel, it looks like the Angels are a decent contrarian stack.
You going to get into any preseason NFL action tonight?
Probably not. I forgot that was even happening.
You want to know how big fantasy sports has gotten? $50K to first on a $10 tournament.
Yeah, I did see that. I looked like 2 days ago, and I was just like, man, I might have to play this. But I've never played. Do you play preseason?
Yeah, I did last year and the year. I just football is my favorite. Other than basketball, football is my favorite sport to play for DFS purposes. It's a total toss up. Like even a lot of these beat writers are like, okay, this guy should get snaps. He should get some work. But it's tough. Nolan Kelly took some time to put out a preseason article for today. It's free on awesomemode.com, so check that out. But really, you're scrolling through beat writers' feeds. You're trying to figure it out. Obviously, one of the big things is knowing who's injured. So then those guys, and another thing is like first stringers. Cam Newton's not going to play at all. well, then you know that whatever quarterbacks are on the roster, you might see 2 quarters and 2 quarters. It's not the reason. The one thing I don't like about it, and I hate doing content for it, isn't because it's not fun, but you're not really researching any numbers, any
Right.
stats, any metrics. You're just like looking. You're scouting the internet for information, which is kind of brutal.
Yeah, that's how I feel about preseason NBA because I do content for that and obviously play it. And yeah, it's a completely different research process. But that's why I doubt I'll end up playing it tonight, just because locks the same time as baseball. But obviously, if Nolan wrote an article, that would be a good starting point if I do decide to play.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably get into it. It's funny because everyone's 5,500. It has nothing to do with like building a roster within the salary cap.
Right.
It's just who's going to get any potential workload. I'll play. I mean, not a lot. It seems unwise to go heavy on preseason when really I don't want to say it's all guesswork, but there's certainly a decent amount of it involved. And if like you're hoping your quarterback plays 2 quarters.
I'll say so. I guess do you want to be stacking like second units or third units together or whatever?
The problem is that you would think so, but one of the issues with that again is these games are generally so low scoring because the teams and players are so bad that stacking a quarterback with 2 wide receivers in theory could work if he goes off, but these guys so rarely go off.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're just playing really bad players.
Right. So I've always tried to spread it out, just hoping like, 1 or 2 of these guys can catch lightning in a bottle and get it done. What are you doing back to baseball here with your top stacks? I mentioned that Boston and the Yankees have easily the highest totals. You like both of them, right? We both like them. Any other teams that stand out to you? You talked about, say, Atlanta earlier. What else here?
Yeah, so I haven't crunched yet, but I'm pretty sure I'll get to a lot of Boston, probably a good amount of the Yankees. Mentioned Atlanta standing out. I think that the Reds game is kind of an appealing spot. It's not the highest probability because both pitchers are good, but when you look at the slate and there's so many good pitchers, there's not a ton of great hitter sparks on the slate. You have San Francisco, you have San Diego, Detroit and Minnesota are both fine, but they're not great American. Same for Fenway. You have Miami. So I think the best hitting environment here is probably Cincinnati, and you get pretty affordable pricing as we had talked about. Looking at the top stack tool, it looks like the Reds are projected to be higher owned than they should, which makes sense, I think, because they just give you some really good value plays. But it looks like the Cubs are coming in a little bit under owned. So on slates where a lot of the pitching is good, I tend to just kind of gravitate towards the best ballparks. So I could see getting to some Cubs and some Reds as top stacks in addition to the obvious ones.
For sure. You know what I find funny, by the way? You know how people are very tribal with certain things and like even things that they probably have no business being tribal about?
Sure.
I mean, I totally admit it. The tribalism when it comes to me and my people, like my family and my neighbors and stuff, and everyone that loves the Eagles, like there's no doubt some tribalism there. You go to an Eagles game and no one cares whether they know you, who you are, where you're from. The only thing that matters is that you have an Eagles jersey on, right?
Right.
But the tribalism that I don't understand is time zones. And people, like, I'm not kidding. Go on Twitter. There was from the Awesome handle, we tweeted out, what is the best time zone to be a DFS player? People will get in fights about their time zone being better than the one, than the East or the West or Central. I don't get it, man. It's just I don't get it. But there's like legit tribalism there, ganging up.
Yeah, no, I was reading through it and it was pretty interesting.
Oh, it's unique to say the least. Yeah, Tony was Big T was getting into it with a few of our buddies. I don't get it, man. What are you gonna do? Anyway, that'll do it.
Looks like some weather issues in Cincinnati, possibly.
Talk about it then. Is this gonna keep you from having as much interest as you normally would? Because we talked about how cheap some of these Cubs bats are too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think as of right now, I don't think that it'll change anything for me. It looks like it's just storms in the area, and if they hit the stadium, you're in trouble. If they don't, you're fine. I already wasn't really on pitching, so as of right now, I think that would be the biggest concern is getting a pitcher in a rain delay. But as far as the bats go, unless it changes, I think that I'd still roll with it. There's just some risk, but obviously pay attention to the Awesemo weather account or whatever else you follow for weather.
All right. It's not Pacific time, Achilles. That's ridiculous.
I kind of I like playing DFS on the West Coast. I hate doing content on the West Coast.
It's definitely Eastern time. I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'm literally doing exactly what I said. I think is ridiculous.
I thought you were just saying you hated playing DFS on the West Coast.
No, I don't. I think Central Time might be the best because it's like football starts at 12, baseball starts at 6, ends at 12 instead of 1.
Yeah.
Probably is, right?
Yeah, when I lived in St. Louis, I enjoyed it.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us. Thanks for watching as always. Hit us with a thumbs up if you liked the video. You want to see more. You want to help support the content, awesemo.com, the Awesemo YouTube channel. It helps us out greatly, and we appreciate it. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well so you always know when new content's going to drop next. Stick around. Same channel right here, same stream. You got the Live Before Lock show coming up. They're going to take you up till 7:05 Eastern time. And again, if you wanted to check out some preseason, check out the article. Nolan just dropped it today. It is free. It is on awesemo.com, along with all of our other free content for the NFL season-long stuff. Sorry, not the same stream. Not the same stream. Josh confused me today because he said that he would be on Live Before Lock, but he would not be producing. So I figured, all right, maybe he just had something come up. But anyway, Josh Engelman is going to be with Jake, Harry, and they're going to talk to you about more baseball, and it's going to be live, and it's going to be before lock coming up after us. Good luck tonight. Adam and I will close out the week with you tomorrow on the Deeper Dive.